Today, we're going to learn how you can have $150,000 extra dollars to spend in retirement. Now, usually when people think about having more money to spend in retirement, they think they've either had to save more during their working years, or they think that they need to know how to earn a very high rate of return on their retirement nest egg. But today we're going to talk about a third method to give you more money to spend in retirement. And this will apply to almost anybody. You don't have to be wealthy. You can be of very modest means. So let's dig into this episode of Retirement Crusaders. Now, you've got lots of different pots of money, right? You've got cash in the bank, a money market fund, treasury securities. You've got investments in IRAs and 401ks. You might have annuities. You've got stocks, some that you hold for the long term, some you hold for the short term, and you've got some mutual funds, for example. So you got lots of different pots of money. So what we're going to look at today is by withdrawing money from the correct pots, you can actually have more to spend in your retirement years. Each pot that you have is taxed differently while it's growing and also when you withdraw funds from it. So that's what we're going to take a look at today, so you can use that different method of how your money's taxed on different pots, use it to your advantage. All right. In our example today, we're going to assume that you've only got two pots of money to make this easy to see. Let's assume you've got one pot that's IRA or 401k money and another pot that's regular money. Like, let's just say it's in a bank account. Okay. So we're going to make some assumptions for this example that I'm going to share with you. The first assumption is both pots of money earn 6% a year. Second assumption is that the taxpayer in our example, between his federal tax and his state tax, is in the 33% tax bracket. Okay, so it means each additional dollar of income he pays 33 cents in taxes on. We're going to also assume this taxpayer needs to spend $6,000 a year, and he's got to withdraw it from one of these pots. Okay, and we'll further let's ignore mandatory IRA distributions just to make this example simple, so we can get the concept and see how it can benefit you. Okay, so in our first scenario of these two pots, we're going to assume that the taxpayer withdraws all the money that he needs only from the IRA account, or from the IRA account first. So he starts today with $100,000 in each account. $100,000 in the IRA, $100,000 in his savings account. And what he does, he decides, I'm going to take the money from the IRA account first. Over 20 years, after taking the money he needs for spending, he would have exhausted that IRA account. It'll be down to zero. And he would have also needed to tap into the money he had in the bank, so that the money in the bank, even though it was growing 6% a year, and it increased, but he still had to make withdrawals from it, leaving a balance at the end of 20 years of $211,000. Okay? Now, keep in mind that by withdrawing from the IRA money first, in order to have that $6,000 to spend, he needs to withdraw $9,000, right? $9,000, 33% tax comes off the top, and then it leaves him $6,000 to spend. Okay, now let's look at a different scenario. In this scenario, rather than spending the IRA money first, he spends the money in his bank account first. Okay, so same starting situation. Starts off with $100,000 in each pot, but each year he takes the $6,000 from his savings account. Now, the savings account earns 6% a year, and he has to pay tax on that earnings each year, and then he withdraws his $6,000. So at the end of 20 years, that savings account is now at the bank. That $100,000 is now $40,000, right? He's taking money out each year, and the balance is depleted. But he hasn't needed to tap the IRA money at all. So that balance has grown to $320,000. So what did we have on the other slide? $211,000. Now he ends up doing it this way by using his savings first and letting his IRA grow. He ends up with a lot more money. In fact, $150,000 more over 20 years, even though he only started with 200,000. So as you see, you don't have to be rich to make this work. This works for everybody. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, hold up, Larry. You're going to say, all of that IRA money that's accumulated, that's all going to be eventually taxed. I agree with you, but consider the following. This is my answer. By not having to pay the money to IRS today and deferring it for many years, that's a valuable thing. A lot of people don't understand this idea of tax deferral and why it's so valuable. Let me give you an example. If a wealthy guy comes along and says, tell you what, I'll give you $100 million today, but you got to pay me back in 30 years. Just because you have to pay him back doesn't mean it doesn't have any value, because you'll have that $100 million to invest, and whatever it earns, that's yours. You get to keep that. So it's the same thing with IRS. If I don't have to pay IRS for 20 or 30 years, that money I get to keep, I can invest, and whatever it earns, that's mine. So that's a really good thing that you put off the money till way into the future to pay, and it makes you wealthier. Next, even if you leave the money to your heirs, they also get a 10-year deferral if you leave your, say, IRA or 401k to them. Now, another possible advantage is your heirs may be in a lower tax bracket. So that's a good thing that instead of you spending the money, if you leave the IRA to them, they're going to pay less tax. The other thing I would urge you to consider is, why shouldn't, if you're leaving an IRA or 401k money to your heirs, why shouldn't they pay the tax on it? Why should you pay the tax on money that you don't even get to enjoy? So it's okay that this IRA has built up and you may not even get to use it all. Let them pay the tax. They're going to get the benefit. Now, one other consideration. If in your estate plans, you plan to leave money to a charity, could be your religious institution, your school, wherever, the charity will pay no tax at all. So you always want to leave IRA or 401k, that type of tax sheltered money, to charity, because it means that by deferring the tax on it, you haven't paid it, and when the charity gets it, they don't pay it. So it's not just tax deferral, it's tax elimination. So these are all the reasons why what I've shown you, which is to use your regular money first and let your tax deferred money grow as long as possible, it will make you richer. You will have more money to spend in your retirement years. Now, I want you to understand all the related issues here. And the related issues are the fact that IRS taxes different pots of money differently. The first issue actually is this issue of tax brackets. So when you pay taxes, you pay in layers. The first little bit of money that you make, the first 20,000, you pay 10%. Then this other chunk, this is for married people. If you earn between $20,000 and $83,000, you pay at 12%. Now, let's say you're in the middle here of this range. Let's say your taxable income is $70,000. What you notice is that if you added another $13,000 of income, 70 plus 13 would take you to 83, that 13,000 would be taxed at what rate? Still 12%. So by understanding this, you may decide that in many years, it's a good idea. This year I'm only in the 12% tax bracket. I'm going to take $13,000 out of my IRA or 401k because it's good to pay tax on it when you only have to pay 12%. Federal, you may have to pay your state also, depending on where you live. So the first thing that relates to our whole issue of having more money to spend is paying as little tax as possible. So you've got to know your tax brackets, and you've got to know what are the good times to actually pay taxes on certain pots of money. Now, let's look at another related issues. So clearly this relates to the fact that IRA and 401ks are taxed terribly at your highest marginal tax rates. So you always want to time the withdrawals of these to the best years when your tax bracket is lowest. Withdrawals from banks or money market funds, something you've already paid tax on, withdraw at any time. That's always the money you want to use first. In fact, let me share a concept with you. It's better to use your principal, your interest and your principal of regular money that's already been taxed before you start to use, say, IRA money. Now, some people think, oh, I don't want to use my principal. My principal's sacred. Well, I'd like to ask you to forget this idea of principal, because if I showed you a big pile of money, $100 bills, and I said, show me what's interest and principal, you couldn't do that. It's because there is no such thing. Interest and principal is something in your brain. There is no such thing. It's all green dollars. So it's better to spend interest and principal of regular money where you've already paid the tax before you go and use IRA money or other tax sheltered money. Okay. Annuities. Man, the tax on that's crazy. If you have a deferred annuity and you decide to take $5,000 out of the interest you've earned, you're going to pay tax on that at ordinary income rates. But if you decide to annuitize that annuity, meaning take payments over years, say like lifetime payments, you might pay only tax on 20% of each payment. So the way annuities are taxed, very weird, very odd, very inconsistent. Stocks, another thing that's inconsistent. Long stocks that you hold more than a year, long held stocks, are taxed at a low rate. For most people, 15%. And the dividends on most of those stocks also at 15%. Maybe even less for a lot of people. But for just about everybody, 15%. There's a few people that might pay 20 or even 23%, but they're very rare. There's not a lot of those. So long held stocks, where do you want to buy those? You always want to buy and hold those outside of an IRA because they have advantageous low taxation. Whereas short hold stocks that you don't think you'll hold for a year, you want to have those in an IRA. Why? Because that way you can buy and sell, and it's all ordinary income that you won't have to pay tax on until when? Until you actually withdraw money from the IRA. So always hold long hold stocks out of an IRA, short hold stocks within an IRA. Okay. Mutual funds, same idea. Mutual funds that have low turnover, they hold the stocks for more than a year on average, like blue chip stocks that invest in blue chip funds that invest in blue chip stocks. Those you would hold outside of an IRA because they will generate very low taxation to you. Whereas more aggressive funds that say invest in technology stocks and they do a lot of buying and selling, you want to have that in an IRA. Otherwise, you're going to get these 1099s at the end of the year with all this tax you need to pay if the fund has made a profit. So always hold those types of high turnover funds in an IRA. And by looking in the prospectus or calling the fund if you need to, you can ask, how much is the turnover each year? And they'll tell you. And it'll be something like 100, 150%. That's a high turnover fund. Hold that in an IRA. Real estate, taxed very inconsistently. If it's your home, and as long as you've lived there 2 out of the last 5 years, you can sell it in the first $500,000 to a married couple. There's no tax, okay? Investment property, however, it could be the same exact house, but if it was an investment property, when you sell it, it gets a little complex. It should be 15% tax because it's a capital asset, should be capital gains tax, but then IRS complicates it and they have something called recapture. So on a big chunk of the gain, you'll pay something called the recapture tax, which is 25%. So with real estate, it's a little odd. But here's the important point. When you sell mutual funds, when you sell stocks, when you sell real estate, you get to choose. So you can always time the sale or the withdrawal of money from different assets when it's most advantageous to you and have more money to spend in your retirement years. Now, there's one more issue that I want to mention, which is if you have a forecasted change in your tax bracket. For example, let's take this example, you retire in February, so you only have 6 weeks of income this year. You're not going to have any earned income the rest of the year, and you're not going to start your Social Security till next year. So the rest of this year you may have a very low income. This is a good year to take money out of an IRA or 401k. So when you can forecast that your tax bracket is either going up or down, that's a good signal when you want to either make withdrawals or not make withdrawals so that you can take withdrawals in the years when your tax bracket is lowest. Now, and of course, there's one other issue. Taxes aren't everything. There may be family or health reasons why you need to sell a piece of real estate or sell some stocks that might not be in your best tax interest, but for other reasons in life you need to do it. So taxes aren't the only thing in life. See you next time on Retirement Crusaders when we'll have more super duper ideas.